Oh, hello there. Welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and backwards, my name is Yuret, and I don't know why I'm telling you this. Today I'm chatting with Eric Larson, a freelance illustrator and motion graphics artist, about his journey from leaving professional ballet dancing to discovering animation and then turning that into a full-on successful freelance career. Eric has worked on projects like The Greatest Poem, Netflix's Principles of Pleasure, Her Justice, and a super cool artist collab that I'm part of, which is actually how we met in the first place. In our chat, Eric is going to share how he fast-tracked himself from zero to getting paid big bucks to make animations as a freelance artist, and the self-help animator's book that he's modeled his career off of, which has changed his life. So without further ado, let's jump in. Hi, Eric. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thanks. How are you?
Good. So we actually met because we're part of this artist collab thing where we're putting together our own short animated films into an anthology to create a pitch, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's I think the ultimate goal is to
That's the
create
ultimate
pitch
goal
at the moment.
So
yeah.
We're just random internet strangers. Great. Except we met through art, which is fantastic. So, okay. So you are an 2D animator right now, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't do storyboarding or like directing, you just do 2D animation. So like, tell me how you got into this.
Yeah. So I was a professional ballet dancer before animation. And I was kind of early in my career, but wanting to get out of ballet for various reasons. I moved up to New York. I did some other things and eventually found my way into NYU. We can go back to the other things. Just the short version of the story. I got into NYU. I started studying creative writing there. Ended up transferring programs to this digital communications program where I found work by Yukai Do and Masanobu Hiraoka, who, just two fantastic 2D animators. And I was like, oh my God, motion graphics and animation is like a thing. I want to do that. And then I started doing that, and now I'm doing that.
Okay, amazing. But you said that is a very short story, but let's lengthen it somewhat. So you were a professional ballet dancer, which takes like a huge amount of rigorous training and talent and skill and professionalism. And then you were actually in the industry. And then you're like 20 something years old and decided that wasn't for you. So you just packed up your bags and moved to New York?
Pretty much. Yeah. So straight out of high school, I went and danced with the Sacramento Ballet in California.
Yeah.
Full-time company. We danced, 9 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week, depending on if we had shows that week. It was like a 9-month contracts, and we'd get the summers off. And by summers off, I just mean that we didn't get paid and we had to go find something else to do for the summers. Then after a couple of years, I moved to Sarasota, Florida to dance with the Sarasota Ballet down there. I got to dance with one of my idols in the dance world, Alina Kojikaru. She came to dance Giselle with us, which is just a really famous ballet. And like, if you're going to see her dance anything in person, like that's the thing to see her do. And this was right around 2008, 2009. So the reason why I actually moved to Sarasota was because of the huge financial meltdown that we were experiencing. And I thought, because I was really young and naive and I didn't pay attention to what was like happening in the world outside of like my bubble, I thought the first company I was with was just having like money problems, which they were, but it was because everybody was having money problems. So that's why like I left initially. Sacramento was a fantastic company, but Sarasota was a new opportunity. So I went out there, danced with them. And while I was in Sarasota, there's this theater company called the Oslo Theater Company. And they do a lot of like pre-Broadway runs of musicals and plays. And they're just a world-class theater company. And they did a joint production of the show called Contact, which is a big dance show. It's choreographed by Susan Stroman. And they had ballet dancers from the company in the theater production. So I went to be one of the dancers in the theater production while I was full-time at the ballet company as well. And I didn't know what a swing was at the time. So I got cast as what's called a swing in theater. And like an understudy, they cover roles. Like if somebody gets sick or somebody gets injured, you know, the understudy goes on. But for a swing, they actually cover everybody's roles. And I didn't know that until the first day of rehearsal when you know, we all had 2.5 weeks to learn the show. And where the 7 people I covered had 2.5 weeks to learn one role, I had 2.5 weeks to learn 7 roles.
Oh my goodness.
Um, it was like the most panic, the most stress, the like I blocked out most of it in my brain because I was just so focused on knowing what I needed to know. And after that experience, I was like, man, that was really hard. I want to do this
Wow.
like full time. Um, so I finished my contract in Sarasota and I moved to New York to do musical theater. I did musical theater here for a couple years. I got to be a swing in different shows and live my panic, stressed out dreams. And then hit a point where I was like, I actually had run into this actress who was in a movie I really loved as a kid. She was one of the stepsisters in Cinderella, in the Brandy Whitney Houston Cinderella. And I met her at a show and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, I know you from when I was a kid, which I don't know how she felt about me saying that, but it was true. And I ran into her like 6 months later and she was just coming back from an audition. She, you know, had a really great career where she was doing like films and Broadway shows and all these different things. And I was chatting with her and she was like, yeah, I just came from this audition and you know, it's me against 9 other women. I have no idea if I'm gonna get the job because they're all super qualified. And I recognized this pattern in theater that you are always like hungry for the next job. And it's not really in the same way that we're hungry for a job, like in animation, because it becomes very personalized in a like a physical way, right? So I'd go to auditions and either like I was too skinny or too big or too short or too tall or too, you know, all of these physical traits. And meeting this actress who had a great career, I was like, I don't think I want to do that. So I
Yeah.
need to go find something else to do.
Wow.
um, yeah, and then I ended up going to NYU, and you
So
know,
wait. So,
yeah, go
you
ahead.
first of all, you only choose careers that are like extremely artistic and
A
like
little competitive and
grueling.
challenging.
But okay, so
Yeah,
you're 20 something at this stage in your life, and you
yes,
reach a moment where you're like, wow, I've been through a career already that didn't work out financially. I've changed to this other career, which is like high stress and I love, but I don't know how much I can take of it. And then you're like, I'm gonna go back to school
yeah,
for what did you decide? Like, because you just took like a general arts degree?
yeah. So I got into this the school called Paul McGee, which is the School of Professional Studies at NYU. It was for like adults who wanted to go to school, as opposed to, you know, people who are 18, 19, who are just out of high
Yeah.
school and
Yeah.
going to school. Um, and they had a creative writing program where we had, I mean, like world class authors were coming in to work with us and to teach us. One of our professors just won like a huge prize in poetry last year. So this is like amazing program that nobody knew about because they didn't do a great job marketing the
Yeah.
program. And 2 years into that program, it was looking like it was starting to shut down. And so I was like, well, I'm at NYU and they've got this other digital communications, digital media and communications degree. I want to edit stuff. Like, well, I'm going to go try that because it was still, you know, storytelling as with the writing and stuff. And then, yeah, through different teachers, design teachers and animation teachers, I found my way into animation.
How did it feel to be, you pursued different career paths for so long, and even when you were pursuing school, it was like shutting down again. Like it just keeps it, from my perspective, you kept reaching like, walls of challenges. How did it feel to like, be further on in your career and continually like not have something confirmed, locked down that you wanted to do, and just kind of be open-minded about things?
I mean, I think at the time I was so open to like figuring out what I wanted to do in the long term. Cause, you know, as a dancer, I knew that unless I became a director of a company or, became a choreographer or went into teaching, like my dance career was limited. So
Yeah.
now I was starting to think like, what do I want to do for the rest of my working career potentially? Um, and I was having successes pretty quickly with some things as far as like getting work and making money. Not always great money, but I was making money. Um, so that helped me not get too stressed out about like, oh, I've hit this pivot point. Like I'm just gonna pivot. That's like kind of a thing that I find if you have to pivot and you
Yeah.
feel like the impetus to do it and you're like, that's cool, that's something I'm interested in, like just do it. Because you don't know what's going to happen unless you do, right?
Right. It's scary, but like you never know. But okay, so how do you feel now that you've been animating for a couple of years? Is this the thing, or is this kind of, you know, you're just exploring this right now, I guess?
This is like the one thing until the next thing. I don't know when
Yeah.
the next thing comes up. I'll
Well, I don't
tell
know.
you
I'm just
like,
wondering, like, is it the thing? Like, are you completely satisfied, fulfilled, and this is what you like? You've checked out different career paths, and in animation, you're like, this is actually something I want to pursue until I pass away.
until I'm dead.
I mean,
This is,
that's what I said to myself.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so far, I love animation. For the most part, I love the people who work in work in this field, and even people I don't necessarily get along with. Um, they're still generally really passionate about what they're doing. They're just passionate in a way that conflicts with the way that I'm passionate. So, it's nice to be in an industry, at least on this end where I'm on like the more the commercial end of things, where people are trying new things. They're excited. You're in a project for a short period, you're paid pretty well, and then you get to like go do something else, which was for me something obviously I like to like go do something else. So in this career, I don't have a whole lot of long-term fatigue yet. And I've been doing
Yeah.
this for like 3 years now. So
Wow.
we'll
Nice.
see. 3 more years.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So you discovered motion design in school and you're like, I
Yeah.
want to do this. I just have a random question, but like your animation, like I didn't know you were a ballet dancer until you told me, but I can see it in your animation somehow. Does that make sense? Like you're very
Yeah.
much about like fluid movements and like body and like stuff like that, I guess. Am I just off the mark, or like when you're animating, like what is the state of being that you're pulling that inspiration from? Because like when I'm animating, I'm like I go to like this childhood place that was just filled with like old timey cartoons mixed with like new cartoons mixed with like stop motion, and like I just tap into this like, I don't know, black hole of like all these influences just mashed together, and then when I'm animating, that's what comes out. Like is it that for you?
That's probably what's happening.
That's
Yeah.
probably what's happening.
I mean, there's definitely things that I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to characters, even though, 2 years ago I couldn't draw anything. But I was like, oh, characters, like that's a cool thing to do. Let's try that. Uh, it's just like that, that sense of movement, that sense of what movement means, what movement communicates to somebody else, how you feel when you see something.
Yeah,
Like that just all of that really resonates with me. Um,
totally.
yeah.
I mean, as you're just talking, I can tell because your stuff is so colorful and fluid and stuff,
Yeah.
which is another interesting thing for me because most people I talk to, including myself, we grew up doodling like crazy. And did you do that at all? Like you haven't mentioned that.
No.
So you really just started drawing when you were in school. You're like, I think this is cool. I like movement. I'm going to get into this. So then, okay, so you went to NYU. You got into
Mhm.
motion graphics. Like, how did you become a full-fledged independent freelance person? Because you haven't worked for a studio or whatnot, have you?
Nope.
So how
Nope.
did you how did you so the day you got your certificate or whatever it was, where did you start? How did you get your first job? And then how have you continued doing that?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that I did. The first thing is I started following Reese Parker on Instagram, and he is brilliant. I got to work with him. Like it was one of those like, oh, I'm on a job with somebody I really admired. This is so cool. Because like I'd been following him for I think 2 years at that point, and then I got hired on the project that he was directing animation for, which was just really exciting. But he in one of his like Q&As, somebody said, how did you get into freelancing? And he was like, oh, I read the Freelancer's Manifesto by Joey Korenman, who runs School of Motion. And I immediately bought the book. I devoured it. Everything in that book works.
Okay, so you're like,
so
I'm not doing any, I don't have any job right now. I just know that I like this. And you're following this guy on Instagram, and he's like, I read this book and it changed my life. And then you're like, okay.
Yep, pretty much. I had started working with a producer on like random projects while I was in school. So he kind of like tied me between like school and then the rest of work life with a couple of projects. But yeah, the Freelancer's Manifesto, and then doing Motion Hatch's 6 month or their 6 week and then their 6 month like intensives. What do they call them? Like their mastermind, the 6 week mastermind, and then the 6 month accelerator course. Like those, between those, the Freelancer's Manifesto, and then my drawing teacher, that's where my career has been just coming out of.
Amazing. That makes sense though. Okay. I'm interested in this book.
Yes.
this book. Like, how did it change your life? Like, what do you mean? Like he takes you through like step by step on how to find a job, or like, because I've read the synopsis of it. He's basically is like, here's how to make 6 figures within a year with like a couple people attached to your team, and like have independence, specifically as a motion graphics person, which is crazy. So because his path is like, he was working for every studio, blah blah, hated it, didn't have control, and then he switched his life. Okay, so where did what am I trying? I'm trying to ask, like, how did you implement what you learned in the book specifically to how your career actually changed? Like, what are the actionable things that actually paid off from the book to your personal career? And also, are you making 6 figures? you don't have to answer that.
So to answer the first question, essentially he talks you through how to find studios that are doing projects that you would love to work on. That part works, but I mean, that part's pretty easy.
Yeah, like you like just look up studios and you email them. You're like, hi, it's me.
That's where he gets really like in the weeds. It's like, instead of just sending an email to like jobs at, which I have done, and like 1 out of 100 emails gets responded to. He goes through like, this is how you find the email for the producer, the director, the executive producer, the art director, any other animators who might be on the team. Like he goes through all of these really explicitly, like how to get this information. And then how to craft an email to these people who don't know you. You know, how do you send that first email in a way that's not like, hey, give me a job, I'm good. You know, but that opens a door for conversation, for building relationships, and then literally goes through like 5 phases of how to craft the next 5 phases of emails to where you're on somebody's roster, go-to freelancer. They're calling you, you know, every couple of months because they've got new jobs for you.
Wow. So it's like when I was in the business world, that we would call that like a nurture sequence, where you're like, is that what he calls it too? Where you're like nurturing your customers into paying for your services, basically through email. It's super interesting. I mean, it makes sense, and it works. Because like, you know, next time XYZ studio has a project where they have a need for an animator, they already know who you are. You're a nice guy. They know you can do the work, whatever. So, okay. So after reading this, I don't know if there's more steps, but you like went through the studios where you're like, I really love their work. It'd be awesome to work with these people. And you ended up working with Reese himself, I guess. You did the email thing. You found these producer emails, animator emails, whatever. And then the leads just came to you. Like, even though you didn't have other experience other than just school work and like production stuff from school.
So that was kind of like the gap bridger for me. I saw so many people talking about personal projects, the way to get work. If you don't have personal projects, don't expect work. Because where I graduated from school, I had a really good understanding of like the basics, and I had like some typography based projects that were professional level. But most of the rest of my work was like not at that level at all. So I took on, every like small project that I could get my hands on while I was working on the personal projects that were in styles that I wanted to work in.
Ah,
Whereas like I want someone to see this and hire me to do this.
totally.
And because of those personal projects, like now I'm on track to make six figures for the first time in my career this year.
Oh my goodness, congratulations. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to me because a lot of people put personal projects completely to the side and rely on their school demo reel or whatever, which is just like assignments from teachers that, they didn't want to do it, but they're like, oh, a rigging job came up. I did some rigging. I'll just apply to it. Oh, a layout job came up. I did some layout in school. Here's my application. But your strategy was like, I'm going to take whatever job I can to like make money and get experience in like this freelancing world, while specifically putting my hard ass work into something that I really would love to do and show off what I want to do.
Yep.
And then you, then what? Like you have this personal project and then what? Like people just see it and they're like, oh, hire you. Great. Or you use that as your demo reel or.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially, as I'm going through that same freelance process with the emails and like nurturing these relationships, then I put those new projects in my new reel and say, hey, I've got these new projects. I know we've been talking for like 6 months. Here's a new reel. There's a bunch of new work in there. Then they see, oh wow, this is something, you're doing stuff now, and I know you now because we've been talking for a couple months. I see your personal projects. Hey, we've got this project.
Well, there's no shame in following up, aka like hounding someone over a period of time.
Every 3 months.
Every 3 months, you send an email, and the email. Wow. I mean, I was going to say the email says, but I guess we'll have to read the book to find out which we should write it in that email.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what I'm doing at this point is every time I've got availability opening up, I send emails to the studios that I'm in contact with and say, hey, just so you know, I've got, July through August available for bookings. Here's a new reel. There's a bunch of new work in there. Hope you're having a great day. And then, sometimes they say, oh, that's great. Good to know. If we have something that comes up, we'll reach out. Otherwise, keep us updated on availability. That seems to be something that generally has been happening. People want to know that if I'm available to, be able to staff projects.
So what you're describing to me sounds like a lot of project management work. Are you like tracking this all for like in like Excel or something? Because like, you can easily just get caught up in forgetting who you talk to and talking to 3 people at a studio at once, which is embarrassing, and like all this other stuff. And then also like working on your own projects and working on other projects and like this sounds like a coordination nightmare almost.
I mean, it's just like when you're on a project and you have to pay attention to various pieces. I just treat every project like I'm on one of those projects. Pay attention to various pieces. Yes, I've got an Excel spreadsheet that is like, this is the person, this is the studio, this is the last thing we talked about. This is what phase of the freelance manifesto are we in together?
Oh my goodness.
Joey literally is like, this is how you build your CRM, your client.
Your customer relationship management software.
That's what it is.
I've never heard of somebody using this lingo in the artist world, which I think is amazing and incredible. And it's actually something I think about quite a lot. And I'm just like, personally, I'm just putting it off because I just want opportunities to come my way, if that makes sense. Like I'm just like 1 year into this myself, like out of school and whatever. And like, I did something very similar to what you did. Like I made the Silly Duck Wizard at the level of stuff that I wanted to do. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And like, I just put it out into the world. And then I ended up getting like 2 years work out of it, just from like a TV show, another TV show, like all this stuff, just from random stuff. Like I didn't even, well,
you tried.
I tried, but like those opportunities came to me. But like, I don't know, this is super interesting to me because like, this is something that's on my mind all the time. And I don't know what I'm waiting for, but this is like, I don't know if I find like the task daunting of just reaching out to studios, but I'm already literally reaching out to people almost every day for this podcast anyways. Like,
yeah,
I don't know if I feel like I'm also, there's some sort of, did you ever deal with like feeling embarrassed a bit? Like,
absolutely.
Hey, I don't have work right now. Can you hire me? Like,
yeah, I mean, I started this year finishing a project that didn't go great. Just a lot of miscommunication and communication issues that left me feeling like I was a terrible animator and
Hmm.
like I was not professional.
Wow.
Um, I then talked to other people that I had worked for before. And I was like, hey, when I worked for you, was I actually awful, or is this just a bad relationship I had with the studio? And they're like, man, I'm pretty sure it was just a bad relationship because we actually want to hire you this year. So, and then, working at some
You're
of
like,
those
can you hire me
places
right
now.
now, actually? Take me away from
um,
this.
but I had this like terrible experience and then
Yeah.
had 2 months of no work, no inquiries, nothing came through. Um, and was like kind of feeling that like I'm feeling embarrassed and ashamed and imposter syndrome and like all of that stuff. And I thought, each time I send out these emails, I'm always going to say it like I'm just finishing a job. I've got this availability window that's open. Hey, I'm sending it to you. It's available for you. If you want it, that's cool. If not, I'm not putting any pressure, as Joey talks about in the book, not leaving any open loops that make the other person subconsciously feel bad when they
Yeah.
get to the end of the email because they can't respond positively to you.
Yeah. Like
So it's always
desperation or
leaving it
something.
like, this is for you. If you want it, great. If not, that's cool. I've got something else.
That makes sense too. And it's like you're framing it as this is like an opportunity, like I have some free time if you had any projects coming up, not like, please hire me, please, because I'm broke. Also, but when you're going
Yeah.
through that period where nothing is coming, you don't know that in 2 months' time you're gonna have a project. Like every single day that passes, like I know what that feels like. Every single
Yeah.
day that passes, you're like, what the fuck? Like, what's wrong with me? Like, am I gonna die? Can I make ends meet? Can I,
Am I
do I
ever
have to
going to work
scramble
again?
twice as hard? Am I gonna be homeless? And then like,
Yeah.
do you go on an unemployment during those period time? I don't know if you can in the States or whatever.
Um, I could during the pandemic, which was awesome. I mean, of the things about the pandemic that were good, because most of it was terrible,
Yeah.
that was a nice thing that they changed the rules for freelancers to be able to go on unemployment. Um, but this year that
Freelancers
ended.
couldn't go on an unemployment before. That's crazy.
Nope.
You're
You're
not valued as
basically at
a
risk.
uh, but are you
Yeah.
random question, are you paying unemployment when you're working? I think here you can opt to pay unemployment, your own unemployment, if you're on a
That's
job that doesn't have unemployment automatically taken out of your salary. Anyways, random aside, I don't need
I
to.
should I should look that up. I should definitely know. I don't think that you can. I don't think that's an option, but now I'm gonna have to find out and I'm gonna have to like start pushing my local Congress people. Hey, make this an option that I can opt into. I'll pay more, in my taxes if I can get unemployment. That'd be great.
Yeah, totally.
Um,
Interesting. So,
yeah,
okay. You just said you're on your way to make six figures this year, which is absolutely incredible. Like I think like 99% of people in this industry do not make six figures at all. And you're 3 years in. And because like you start, I don't know, in Canada, you might start a salary at like 45,000 or like 50,000 for like junior animator or something, even less sometimes, maybe sometimes more. And then you slowly grind your way up by like a raise here, a increase in contract here, and then you like take a new contract and you're back to square one. And then like, most people don't reach that, but in 3 years' time, you've already reached, the 1% percentile of animators, which is incredible. How much, what does your year look like? Are you doing like a typical 9 to 5? Are you doing, you took 2 months off, I guess.
yeah. I took 2 months off.
I took
That's
two
right.
months
That's right. I had to
off.
talk about that. um, yeah. I mean, essentially, with freelancers for the kind of projects I do, I've been hired. I think the longest contract I got so far was 6 or 7 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
So it's basically like, you know,
Wow.
what,
2 months.
a few of those projects throughout the year, and then that's the year worth of different projects because I work a lot in advertising, a lot of short form stuff. Like I'm not working on television shows, I'm not working on movies where it's much longer contracts. Not that I wouldn't like to. That would be great down the road. Um, but the shorter contracts often pay pretty well.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I'm working on projects that don't pay super well. Everything pays better than ballet. So let's just like be clear about that.
Let's be,
because
if anybody's listening to this and thinking of becoming a ballet dancer in their as their second career, first of all, you're probably too old. Second of all, they don't pay well.
yeah, I mean, if you're in, like the top level companies, they're making okay money. But if I didn't have scholarships at NYU, I wouldn't have been able to afford it. I got really great scholarships, but as a ballet dancer, I was making, I think the most I made was $20,000 in a year. And that was like
Um,
before taxes.
I don't know what to say,
So
but I have no comment about that. That's like uh
it's
that's
crazy.
that's below poverty line, I think, isn't it?
Yep, a little bit, a
That's
little
crazy.
bit.
So whenever next time I'm at a ballet and I'm watching ballet, I'm gonna just throw money on the stage and be like, guys, collect this.
Yes,
This
you
is
should definitely do that.
here's some
Definitely
lunch,
do that.
please. Oh my goodness.
Um,
So
but
okay,
yeah,
so how many
so
projects? So
yeah,
you said you take a couple, like, are you like, 6 weeks at a time? You're taking 10 projects that would be about 50 weeks. Well, more than 50 weeks, 60 weeks, but like I guess
yeah,
8 to 10 projects a year, I guess.
yeah, and depending, on how long or short the projects are, it's somewhere between 5 and 10 projects a year.
Wow. That must be, like that sounds both good and bad to me somehow, because you're always like going on something new and starting from scratch and like working with a different team and then getting approval and
Yeah,
communication and blah blah blah. But like if you're just making bank and leaving and then always on it something new, it's kind of interesting. Like that makes a lot of sense to me too. Like I like a lot of variety in what I do, which
yeah,
like working on the same TV show for 10 years doesn't excite me too much unless it's the TV show that I'm in charge of. But
right.
so, okay, are you also negotiating your contracts too? Or is it like the studio's like, look, we only have a budget for XYZ? Or do they just come to you and say, like, what's your day rate? And you're like $600 an hour.
Uh, yeah, 600 an hour. That would be brilliant.
Yeah, you're basically, you're a lawyer at that point.
Yeah, it depends. Sometimes somebody comes to me with a project and they're like, "Hey, this is how much we have," and that's all the money that there is.
And you're like, thank you, I'll
And
take it.
yeah, and sometimes they're like, "This is what's your day rate?" And then I'll give my day rate, and depending on how quickly they answer, I'll know if I said my day rate was high or if it was low. Um, but I know freelancers in the US who are making between, generally, like 500 a day is like pretty standard,
Huh.
um, to upwards of 1,200 a day, depending on the project. So it's all over the place.
Yeah, fair. So like say somebody comes with you like a simple typography thing, are you gonna charge them the higher day rate based on the studio, or just be like, oh, this is quick and dirty, easy to do, standard day rate?
Depends on a lot of factors. It depends on where is the project going to live at the end of the day. Like, is this, sometimes a studio will be like, hey, this is what we're going to pay you regardless of where it's going to live, and it's like, okay, I can either accept that or not accept that.
Yeah.
But it's when I'm getting like a directing project, which I've done a couple of those as well. um, I want to know, like, is this like a non-for-profit where this is going to go on your website and you're trying to like raise money with this project, or is this like a part of a big campaign that you're putting out where it might just be like typography, but it's going to be
It's like for
playing
Nike
for
or something.
millions of people?
Yeah.
Exactly. Then it would vary.
So you do a little investigation before you even tell them a rate. So they're like, hey, Eric, like we want to
Yeah,
work with you. Can you do this? And you're like, hold up. Can I have some more
let's chat.
info about the project first? Like, where is it living? Who am I working? Like, what are the questions you usually ask to figure out your day rate? Because like, some like, especially in animation where people are not super, how do I say this? I feel like even myself, I'm very timid to give a higher day rate, even though I know my time and what I'm doing is worth more sometimes, because
Yeah,
I just feel weird and awkward about it, where I'm like, no, I want this much money. If you're going to pull me aside out of a different project to like do your thing for a week, like you're going to have to pay me. Like I just ran into this conflict with a project actually right now where I was like, nope, that is my day rate. I'm sorry, you're taking me away from something else. Like I don't
yeah,
have to do this. But most of the time I'm like, oh no, what should I undercut myself just because I might have a higher likelihood of getting it? Like,
yeah. It yeah, it depends. I mean, generally what I want to know is like, how long is the project? What are your expectations for the project? Um, what do you want it to look like? Like, in your mind, what does this project look like? And then realistically, what does that budget look like? Because if I have to hire other people to accomplish something, like the project rate just has to be higher because it's not just my day rate. But if I'm also covering like design, animation, direction, communicating with the client, because they're not going to pay for, a producer, a separate director, a storyboard artist. If I'm doing all those things,
Yeah.
it's like my day is going to be longer. So I'm going to charge more because I'm also like setting other things aside and giving my full brain to this thing.
Makes sense. So you've hired other people to work with you then?
I have. It was a
How was
very
that?
interesting experience.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I thankfully have hired some really fantastic people, but same thing, like I've got to research them. I get like referrals from other people that I know and trust before hiring people. But it's all communication. Everything is
Yeah.
communication. Animation is communication.
Of course. Yeah. Well, so like, since this is interesting to me because you're on these jobs for only like 2 or 3 weeks at a time. When you get director notes back where it's like not going well, and it's like, you've done a big chunk of stuff, and then they're like, oh, we actually wanted this. Like, what do? You just like scramble and figure stuff out on the side, or do you just make sure that the communication is like so clear at every stage along the way?
Scope of work. I always have a scope of work. So I lay out in like a document and in a contract, this is what the project is. This is what our deliverables are. This is how many rounds of notes you can have. I treat every project as if I'm a studio. If I'm, being hired as like a day player, then that's what it is. But if I'm running a project, I have to treat it like I'm a studio running a project. So that if at a certain point the client's like, I want 15 changes on this thing, but they only paid for 6 changes, like either you can pay more or no, you can be happy with what you have, or we can have a kill fee, so that essentially we get to a certain point and we agree up front before anybody does work and anybody has emotions involved, this is how much it would cost you to stop the project before it's done.
Wow. What is a typical kill fee? Just I've never really heard of that before.
It
is it a percent
depends,
of the project?
It's usually like how much of the project has been completed, and then plus whatever percentage for how much is left.
Wow. You're taking this from like a very business approach, which I think is amazing. And I almost think that, like myself included, and like there's other animators too, like we grow up eating, sleeping, and breathing animation. So our egos are so attached to it, and we want to do like the perfect job, and we're perfectionists, and we're not too interested in like all the semantics of like the deal and stuff. We're just like, great, I got the job, I want to do my best, and like, all that fun stuff we get to work on, and we're happy, and we're not thinking about, we could actually turn this skill that's needed into a highly lucrative career for ourselves, which makes sense. Like, you are probably working less, well, especially if you take 2 months off, than somebody who's working every single day on a TV show, I would assume, because they're working 9 to 5 plus overtime, and it's not always 9 to 5. It's more like 9 to 7, 9 to 8, and 9 to midnight on crunch time, which I'm sure you experience as well. This is super interesting to me. I think this is really cool. So how long did it take for you from the moment you got it was a certificate at NYU?
So I got my Bachelor of Science.
Your Bachelor of Science to being a full-time, getting your first gig and getting to a place where you're comfortably paying rent. Like how many, because you've only been doing this for 3 years. How long did it take you to realize what you wanted to do, finish that whole degree and take those master classes, and then be like, now I'm paying my rent and plus?
Comfortably paying rent, I think we got there like we're getting there. It's like the last year and a half, so like a year and a half in.
Okay.
But for like the first year out of school, I also the pandemic just was about to start. It was 2019 when I graduated.
Oh no.
I did some work over the summer, a little bit of work in the fall. I wasn't making great money yet, but I was like, I also knew where I was at. Like I don't try and lie to myself, but I also don't like get overly critical of myself. So I reached out to some people in the industry and said, hey, this is my work. am I like, where am I at? Am I, be real with me, hurt my feelings. I mean, don't hurt my feelings in a mean way, but don't like spare my feelings to not tell me that my work's not professional yet.
Yeah.
And I took a bunch of like extra classes at School of Motion, um, a ton of classes on like Domestica because they're really inexpensive and their teachers are phenomenal. Rodrigo Miguel in particular, new mechanic, he's like just, his classes are brilliant. And trained myself essentially to like, to be good enough to feel confident writing those emails saying, hey, this is the work, this is why you should pay me. I mean, not like saying this is why you should pay me, but showing the work that says this is why you should pay me a day rate that's going to pay my rent very comfortably.
Totally. What were some of the things
Yeah.
what were some of the feedback that you got to get you to that level of professionalism? You know, when you put your heart out there and said, like, give me some feedback on this, what were some of those responses?
Yeah, I mean, there was, I had a sense of movement that was obviously there, but that the movement wasn't like, I couldn't like fit into a pipeline at that point where you wouldn't notice like, well, who animated those shots? Because
Yeah,
I'm not sure, not sure about those guys. So I had to work on a lot of craft. I had to get better at design. I had to train my eyes. I had to look at a lot of design and like critically, like, what is it these people are doing that's so good, and what is it, not even just that's good, quote unquote good, but what is it about it that's intriguing me, that I like it, that I would want to take elements of this and make into something new. So it's just graduating school and knowing that I was okay and I could work at a place as like a junior artist, which I did a little bit of, but then to say I want to excel, I want to be somebody that gets hired all the time on different projects that are exciting. How do I get from where I'm at to where those people are?
interesting.
And that was, just developing as an artist and developing the craft that's there.
Nice. So when you when you're contracted, you're just taking a piece of the pipeline, so that they're like, here are your shots that fit into this other big thing, or it's typically like, here's a whole scene that you do specifically, or like, you're doing we talked about you're doing the typography specifically for the whole thing that fits on top. Like what kind of work is it?
I mean, it's literally all of the things you just said.
Okay. So then
Yeah.
so I'm curious why studio would not have somebody in-house to do those things. Is it like, what are the opportunities that you specifically get?
Yeah, so they often do have people in-house for a lot of those things, but then they're hiring out because a lot of these studios have a lot of work. And they just can't handle it all internally. And to get, a lot of studios I feel like are going more to the freelance model where they have a lot of managers in-house and they have some people who can handle like final composites or like basic animation stuff. And then they've outsourced to people who are more niche, more specific. But I've been hired on projects too. There was a project I was hired on by a fantastic studio where I was animating, I was coloring and texturing, and then I was also handling the final composite for the whole thing. So as a freelancer, what you can do and what you can do well is what you will do.
Yeah. Are you you're using Adobe to do all your motion graphics?
So mostly the motion graphic stuff is in After Effects, and then cell animation is between Photoshop and TV Paint. And TV Paint. I love TV Paint. It's the best.
Okay, interesting. Because like, I'm just wondering, motion graphics are super popular. Did you specifically just right now, right? Because like before, like, I don't know, 15 years ago, everything was cell animation, like 100%. And before that, it was, I don't know, but whatever. Did you choose motion graphics specifically because it was popular, or just because you found that you liked it?
I think I thought I was going to go into motion graphics in school, and then I saw Yukai Do's work, which is very cell animated motion graphics. I'm putting air quotes around motion graphics. Not really realizing that like motion graphics was a very specific thing that wasn't really like what I was drawn to. I was drawn to that like kind of abstracted character animation that gets to go in a lot of different directions, So, I do a bit of everything now. Right now, I'm working on a project that's like all collage work. So we're working with photos and textures and some animated elements. And the next project I'm on is all cell animation. So it's like it really just runs the gambit, which
Wow,
is I love it. That's the best part.
that's great. Perfect. You love it. No, that's really cool. And it sounds like you're working on like so many cool things. I just had a question and it just bounced my brain. But okay, so like you've been doing this for 3 years now. Like, what are next steps for you? Like, you're finally making the income you want. You're managing things. Everything's going smoothly. You're picking up more work. You're making more relationships with studios. Like, what is the end game for you? Is it to just continue to do this and just enjoy doing this, or like, do you want like what is life?
I mean, I'm working on a short film outside of the project that you and I are working on.
Another
Um,
one. Oh my goodness. Where do you find the
yeah,
time?
I don't know, man. My partner's out of town for the next 10 weeks, so I'm just like,
There you go.
oh, what else am I gonna do? I'm just gonna keep working, I guess. No, I mean, not like, in an unhealthy way, but no, if I have, the 2 months that I had off at the beginning of the year, like quote unquote had off because I was unemployed. I didn't just like sit around playing video games. Like I used every day like it was a work day. Worked on my short film, worked on the project that we're on. Um, so I just, regardless of if the client has notes, if the client doesn't have notes, uh, if I have worked for a client during the day and I've got like 2 hours of energy at night, just because that's what I want to do, I'm gonna do it.
So where do you find the internal motivation to do this? Like I understand like you like doing it, you want to do it, but like also, sitting and watching TV or just not doing it. Like, it takes, for me at least, like, this anthology thing we're working on, like I could work on it every single day and I just don't, because I look at it because I'm just like, oh, I don't want to start this after working all day and blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
like, where's the internal motivation coming from? Like, what is that underlying drive that's like compelling you to actually do this?
Um, I think I'm just a little crazy, maybe.
Okay, fine.
There's like a little bit of that. There's just, I came to animation late in life after late in life. I'm not that old. I'm like in my 30s. So, late in life. I'm very young. I'm going to go with young. And I've done so many things that now I'm doing this and it's just so cool to me, like that you can make something in your home that other people will see and relate to and react to, and that you can just do whatever you want with it, like literally anything you can think of, anything that you can draw, anything that you can chop together, you can make that just makes me so excited to do it.
Yeah.
And then it's like I make this thing and then I see it and it comes to life by itself and it's like, what, how did this just happen? This is cool. Yeah, I'm a nerd. That's it. That's what it is.
I love it. No, it makes sense. Like I eat, sleep, and breathe animation. So I totally understand. Like
Yeah.
if I'm not on a podcast, I'm working on a side project. If I'm not doing that, I'm working full time. If I'm not doing that, I'm literally just scrolling through Instagram looking at other people's animations. Like that's it. I don't have any other
Yep.
mode.
Yep.
So would you say, let me try to like sum up your career, I guess. Your career is built off of your hard work ethic, where you're like actually managing yourself and treating this like very seriously. You're also reading the manifesto, but your ability to reach out to people and relationship manage, always having a new reel, and then like learning what it takes to get what people want, I guess. Because even I think it's interesting that even when you put yourself out there and you weren't getting the feedback you wanted, you went back and took a bunch of master classes, which a lot of people don't do. Like I haven't specifically gone back and taken a master class. Somebody doesn't like my work, I just have a mental breakdown. I'm like, well, not a mental breakdown, but I'm just like, oh, well, now I'm sad.
Yeah. Well,
So
not that I don't get sad too, but yeah, continue.
yeah, but would you say that's kind of the foundation of what your career is built on at this point? Because even you can blame it on the manifesto for teaching you these things, but also you had the drive originally to seek out those opportunities and treat this career very seriously, to find that information to take.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds really where my career is culminating right now. And something my mom used to say, and I said sometimes about luck. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And like, I'm just constantly reminding myself, this is a moment, this is like an opportunity to prepare to be lucky.
I love that. This is an opportunity to prepare to be lucky.
Yeah.
I think I've told this story a million times, but when I was at a business conference in my past career and because like business conferences, they get like celebrities to come and speak, do like a motivational speak for no reason other than just like to attract you to come to the main event thing.
Yeah.
So they had Mark Hamill come and talk at this business conference. And the one thing he said stuck out to me because they asked him like, you know, how did you end up with this opportunity? Because he was like literally just sleeping on his like friend's bed, had no items to his name, whatever. And then like Star Wars happened. And he said like he views kind of luck as like a big wheel, and you have to keep spinning it and spinning and spinning it because eventually you'll land on something. But if you never spin it, you're never going to land on it. So that talk like sticks out in my mind because at the time I've always wanted to get into animation and animate, but I just wasn't ever pursuing it. I thought that somebody was just going to come to my door one day and be like, oh, Terry, I can see inside of your brain that you want to animate, even though you've animated nothing before in your life. Like, here's an opportunity to direct a feature film. Like, I was waiting for that for some reason. And then hearing that talk, hearing that talk from Mark Hamill, I was like, am I an idiot? Like, I'm not even producing anything. And I think that I'm going to get lucky. So that always sticks out in my mind as like kind of a pivotal start to change for me. But I like what you said too, you know, like it's an opportunity to get lucky. That makes total sense.
You know, it's funny that too. I think my former career really set me up to know that nothing is just handed to you unless, you know, you're in a situation where something can be handed to you. And let's be real, there are a lot of people where that happens. And some people make art with it and some people, but when I was a dancer, like you had to audition. You know, unless Instagram wasn't a thing. I was around before Instagram. When, you know, you couldn't like be posting your videos and then a company would reach out because they saw you dancing there. Like you had to go places. You had to hustle to get there. My first month living in New York City, I had 40 auditions that That's I went crazy. To. That is crazy. That is like you have to pay for absurd.
The transportation to each one, your time, the food, like the taxi driver, the rent.
Yeah. I mean, I was, you know, thankfully I was living in Hell's Kitchen, which is right where all the auditions are, but I was also paying $1,200 a month in rent when I was like, just like, oh God, I gotta like, how we're gonna like survive this. You know, I was working retail jobs. I was like doing anything to scrape it up to make it work. And, you know, I also was in a fortunate position to have like some help from my parents, which was, you know, I know not everybody has that. And I was blessed with that opportunity. And I was like, okay, this is my opportunity. Take it, run, do everything you can. Go to 40 auditions this month. And I booked my first 2 national tours from doing those auditions.
Wow.
You know, so when I went into animation, I was like, it's the same thing. If I send 100 emails and my work is good, like it's got to be good work before you send them. If I send 100 emails, somebody's going to have something. And they did. And now, you know, now 100%. I'm booked and I have to like turn jobs down, which is a nice feeling, but also not because I don't want to turn jobs down.
You know what you should do? You should take them and then outsource them to other people.
Yeah. Maybe at some point I will do that.
Yeah. I don't know. It makes sense, or at least like, you know, give them off to your friends or something. But I totally feel that, you know, applying to everything, and even that approach with the studio thing. Like, I haven't gone through that specifically in my animation career. I've only applied to one job, and I got it, and I'm still working on it, which is great. But like in my business career, out of school, I applied to 150 jobs, and I got 15 interviews and then 3 offers out of that. But those stats are crazy, like 150 jobs.
And then how did you feel? Because you were saying before, like animation, it feels so connected personally. It feels so like the ego is so involved. Like, did you feel that way about applying for your businesses? Where you were like, I need a job, so I'm going to have to just
I was like, I got the education. These jobs specifically want the education I have. Why? Like, it's just putting 2 and 2 together. I don't know. So there's this thing that I'm kind of struggling with internally. It's like, I'm very protective of this animation spirit that lives within me, whatever it is. And I don't want to expose it to like everything I've learned in the business world, even though I already have. I have this podcast, you know, I've negotiated contracts, like blah, blah, blah. I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, doing pitches and whatever. But I haven't like taken it to the same like kind of methodical approach that I took in my business career, where it's like, you know, at first it's a numbers game, and then you develop your relationships, and then you like, you know, you do the things and you get the training so you can get paid more, and then you it's like I did all of those things in my freaking, this is my business
Yeah.
behind me. but like all of those years, all like until I was 30, I had this like inner animation child I was protecting from all this other stuff. And I was always like, when I retire, I will let this spirit free. And then I was like, well, why the fuck would I let the spirit free when I'm 65 and can't move my arms because I have like arthritis or something? So I better do this now. So then I quit my job immediately, got into animation, but I still have that like mental block that I'm still protecting this like animation thing from approaching it as like just a business for myself. Like, you know, I'm working on a project right now, but I'm not getting paid very well, but I love what I'm doing. So it's just distracting me from like the whole pay thing. Cause I'm like, I love this. It's great. You know, I'm working from home. I'm working with this awesome team. I'm doing exactly the things that I love. But then there's this other thing knocking at my door being like, you're making less now than you did when you started your business career in 2012. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I don't know so this talk is very interesting to me because I haven't heard of anybody approaching it. Like, you know, I've talked to a lot of people of how they have scrambled to start their studio or their freelance career. And I've never heard anybody doing it as methodically as you. And it's getting my wheels turning, I guess, if that makes sense.
yeah. I mean, I feel like you can do both. You can have that magic, like when I'm animating and when I'm like designing stuff and I get to get all colors and, you know, play with all of these like textures and looks and like the camera angles, like my brain just explodes. And I feel like when I was 8, 9, 10, I used to make all the kids in my neighborhood come over to my house and we'd make like movies because my dad had a camcorder. And I think that's why I lost a lot of friends, because I was adamant about like, you have to do this when you're here. And then when they stopped coming over, like I just played
You're
all the
like
roles.
crying in the corner and you're like, retake. You didn't learn your lines.
We have to do it again. Yeah, exactly. So like that person is like in my brain. And then there's the other person that's like, hey, I'm gonna manage the business.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like multiple personalities. I'm gonna manage the business so that you can do the cool shit that you want to do. But we're gonna make sure that you set it up so that you're getting paid well, your contracts are there, you're supported, you're not gonna end up in a too fucked up situation. You know, so that creative thing can just go to town on the work.
Yeah. Can you just do this for me? you can take a cut. You can just outsource to me. It'll be great.
Yeah. So
no, what you're
basically my
saying
next
makes
career is a
100%
producer.
sense. 100% sense.
Yeah.
I guess like, yeah, I don't know. I just, and like, of course you can have both worlds, and I don't know what's stopping me from just pursuing that other world, but I should probably start doing something. Maybe I'll start by reading the manifesto, and that'll help me just, you know, motivate me to send some emails out, because like, you know, I have a lot of connections at this point.
Yeah. And then you're just saying like, hey, we had this great conversation. Just so you know, I've got this availability.
I'm available. The other thing that's on my mind is like stop motion, which I love doing. It's such like a super niche that I already feel like, you know, there's I don't know. I should stop talking because I'm just coming up with excuses now. So there's that.
Yeah, you got to watch out for the excuse monster, right? What does RuPaul say? That your inner demons are getting in the way. Inner saboteur.
Inner saboteur. That's it. Yeah. But it's also, I was having this conversation with a friend who just quit her job like a month ago to pursue like dressmaking and fashion full time. We had dinner one day, and it was a really cool chat where she was like, I wish people told me, you know, to do this before. And I was like, listen, we have all been telling you, if it's not aligning with your internal, like what your heart wants to do, you're rejecting like all this external input and all these things saying like, you know, you should pursue this. You're really good at this. You can do this, versus when you actually decide to do it and people are saying that, it's like, you know, compounding all the positive input and just like helping you feel like you're going full force ahead. So
Yeah.
I don't know. This is an interesting talk for me. I'm glad we had this chat. Thank you for coming on the podcast and interviewing me.
Well,
As we're
yeah,
wrapping up,
go
is
ahead.
there anything else that you want to share? I don't want to take your whole night, but is there anything
Yeah,
that you think
no,
would be interesting for people that are listening and heard this chat to know?
just that if I can be on track to be making the six-figure salary as a freelancer who literally 2 years ago could almost not draw at all. By the way, Michael Matezi, my drawing teacher, he's fantastic. Just read his books, you'll learn everything that you need to know. But if I can do this I didn't even start animating until I was 30, 29, 30, like literally nothing. If I can do it, anybody who wants to do it can do it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your story particularly because like you had so much background in different areas, and then you discovered this thing that you loved and you just were like, this is it, let's go for it. And then 3 years later, I think that's amazing. It's fantastic. Here we are chatting, and this would have never happened if you didn't go to the theater. You weren't what was it called? A slide,
A swing.
a swing. You weren't a swing.
Slide.
I don't know. It's an S word.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think
Yeah.
that's great advice. It just takes like some determination and obviously, some hard work and talking to the right people and getting the right advice and just putting your mind behind it. Because I wonder how many people will read a book like the Freelancer Manifesto and be like, that was cool. And I could do that, but they just don't do it, so
I didn't for the first year after I read it. And then I had a conversation with this guy who was a super successful freelancer. And he was like, did you read this book? And I was like, yeah, I read it like a year ago. And he's like, are you doing the stuff in this book? And I was like, I sent like 2 emails. He said, man, nobody is doing what's in this book. Well, not enough people. He said nobody. Like 2 people that he knew were doing it. He's like, nobody's doing this. Like, do this. Producers want the animators. They need you to reach out to them. So just go do it.
Yeah.
So then I did, and it works.
Wow. Well, I think that's great. Cool. Is there anything else you wanted to share as we're wrapping up?
I think that's it.
Cool. Well, I think
if you're in the US, vote. That's it.
Vote, please. Even if you're in Canada, vote. We just went through an election and like 39% of people in Ontario even voted. We ended up with a majority government
rough.
all over again. Like hardly anybody even. Anyways, this podcast is not about politics.
Either direction that you're voting in, vote.
Yes, just vote. Great. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for coming on and sharing, your journey and your experience. It was an absolute pleasure. I feel motivated to like go and read this book and maybe take my career a little bit more seriously and less art seriously, I guess. But anyways, thanks.
Both seriously.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on the chat. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And if you're listening and you want to follow Eric or reach out to him or check out some of his work, you can do so you can email him at eric@ericlarson.design, or you can check out his work on Instagram at instagram.com/eric.animates, or his website, ericlarson.com.design. And I'll include all those links in the description of this chat. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.